Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Steve Witkoff is in Israel, and now it's being spoken about that they're making it official between Israel and the United States. They're looking for an all-out deal, no more partial deals. What does this include exactly, and what are the updates on the ground that are relevant to this progress and that these statements are coming for? Also, Steve Witkoff is looking to visit the Gaza Strip to see the hunger himself. He wants to verify that there is actual hunger and starvation inside of the Gaza Strip, although they're calling it hunger, not even forced starvation. We're going to talk all about this and about the recent footage that was published by an Israeli prisoner of war inside of the Gaza Strip, Rom Bravlaski. This man published a video, Rom Barslavsky, excuse me. He is held by the Palestinian resistance, in particular by Al-Quds Brigades, the armed wing of the PIJ, who published a video of him today looking at the video of the hunger and the starvation in Gaza with babies starving, and also him looking to be in a really bad shape. They published this video, but they said that this was the final video that we recorded of him before we lost contact with the group that was protecting him. Why? Because Israel, of course, targeted these locations. They targeted the locations where they knew some Israeli prisoners of war are present. He sent out a message, and you can see clearly that the man is starving, saying that the Israeli state can't do that to the infants of Gaza, and that these children are starving to death. And he was saying that if you don't care about the children of Gaza, if you don't care about the infants of Gaza, at least care about us. We're your prisoners of war, and we are not getting food. We're not getting aid. We need to end this war. We need to get out. And of course, he's confirming that he was an Israeli soldier, by the way. All of the remaining prisoners of war in Gaza now have been in the Israeli army. You're talking about people who were primarily in the Gaza division that the Palestinian resistance took down in a couple of hours, the whole division in multiple bases surrounding the Gaza Strip. This is sending strong messages internally in Israel, because some people were denying that there's a starvation campaign, whilst others said, well, you know, this might affect the people who we have there, like the prisoners of the families of the prisoners of war. They knew that if Israel stops all of this aid from going into Gaza, it's going to reach the Israeli prisoners of war. And clearly now they're seeing it happen. He's saying that I might not make it out alive from the Gaza Strip, that these people who are protecting me, they're allowing me to see what's happening on television. Children in Gaza dying like skeletons. I haven't seen anything like that with Israeli children. This doesn't make sense. They didn't have, they didn't do anything wrong. What's the reason that you're doing that? So he is basically saying, please get more food in, get aid into the Gaza Strip. And he is asking for a deal, and that Benjamin Netanyahu is responsible for his blood and for his illness, because many of them are falling ill. The Israeli prisoners of war, you see, Israel, they were conducting a marketing campaign and a propaganda and marketing campaign about the hostages, didn't they? They couldn't care less about them. They're starving them to death. This is what we can conclude. They killed, of course, a very high percentage of them, at least 50, by strikes. Many of those who were released in Gaza confirmed that Israel carried out multiple strikes on them when they were on the way back to Gaza. Israeli soldiers confirmed that they were ordered to shoot at everything going back to Gaza, even if they suspected they were Israelis. And Israel wants to get rid of them because from an Israeli perspective, this is the leverage that is used by the Palestinian resistance against Israel. This is the strongest card that the Palestinian resistance has against them. And now we're clearly seeing that Israel is starving them to death like they are starving the rest of the population to death. And the Palestinian resistance sent a very strong message towards the end of this video. The Palestinian resistance, and again, we're talking about, in this particular case, Al-Quds brigades, the armed wing of the PIJ, they ended it with a clear message. Your prisoners will suffer from what our people are suffering from. If there's a starvation and our people are suffering, your prisoners are suffering from the same thing. This is only going to escalate the tensions more and more, especially with recent protests that have been taking place in Israel. This was one of the recent protests just in the past couple of hours, published on social media by a man called Alon Lee Green from Tel Aviv, and people are escalating with...
We are here blocking now the roads in Tel Aviv. We will not agree to starvation of people. We will not agree to killing children. This is done by our government and our name. We must take the responsibility. As a society, we must choose. Do we celebrate death, or do we celebrate the killing of children, or do we wake up and fight it because the fascist government in our country is leading people to die out of starvation, children to be killed? We cannot agree with that.
So more and more people are protesting now, as you can see, and the images, of course, of the prisoners of war will only escalate tensions further. Now, there have been multiple developments on the ground inside of the Gaza Strip that are showing that there's something going on, either some sort of a political solution or a move to a less intense phase of the war in Gaza, because Israel just withdrew Division 98 completely from the Gaza Strip. They previously released or withdrew 2 brigades from within Division 98 from Khan Yunis several weeks back, saying that they finished their operation, although, well, the operation really hasn't finished against the resistance because they're still there, and they are attacking them with the heaviest blows since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza. But now they're saying that we withdrew all of the 98th Division from the Gaza Strip. This is the most elite, most advanced division in Israel, in the Israeli army. Division 98 has ended its operation in the northern Gaza Strip after months of fighting, including in Khan Yunis and Shuja'iyya. This was announced by an IDF spokesman. They, according to them, destroyed more than 1,500 infrastructures of the Palestinian resistance, and now they are leaving. Did they actually destroy 1,500 infrastructures of the Palestinian resistance? And if so, then how comes the Palestinian resistance still active against them? And are they saying that just as an excuse and to cover up the failure, the huge failure that the IDF is facing inside of Gaza? Well, there are multiple ways to understand this. What can we understand from this? Well, number one, there's an outright confirmation here that the military campaign of Israel, with all of its barbarity and all of the crimes, has failed. Israel could not, cannot, and will not be able to achieve its objectives in Gaza through military power. That's the first sign and the biggest one and the most significant one. 2, Israel doesn't want a solution in Gaza, and they are planning to move on to a less intense phase of the war where they will still be conducting a war or operations against Gaza, but not at the same intensity because they are simply incapable. The army is exhausted. The army is defeated. Tens of thousands killed and wounded. Thousands of Israeli machinery destroyed partially or wholly. Many suffering from PTSD, over 50% refusing to serve, and Israel struggling to make up the numbers. We're only talking about the military, by the way. So that, all of that, shows you that they cannot continue. So the first option is they are reducing the operations in Gaza to a campaign based on targeted campaigns as and when Israel wants to. For example, they see the Palestinian resistance or armed groups that they want to target, they'll target them, but that doesn't mean they're going to go with all of the ground troops because they could not achieve their objectives. The second political option, and third out of all of the options that I've been speaking about, is the fact that we are heading towards a political solution. A political solution in the case of Gaza, meaning a ceasefire. How? Well, we've had circumstances previously where Israel withdrew some of its forces from Gaza, and there was no ceasefire after that. But there were several cases, at least two, where there was an outright ceasefire, and in one other case, there was significant de-escalation for several months. That's in the beginning of 2024, after Israel was reportedly facing more pressure coming from the United States. So these are the options. Either de-escalation, Israel is planning to go into a political solution, and an outright confirmation that their use of power in Gaza, regardless of the level of barbarity, has failed miserably against the Palestinian resistance. Which leads us to the potential of such a solution and what's happening exactly on that front, because Steve Witkoff now is in Israel. He is speaking with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's actually going to visit Gaza. He's planning to visit Gaza for the second time. Multiple reports mention this in Israel, and there are talks between the United States and Israel in relation to the solution. Firstly, this one here, Trump's special envoy for the Middle East landed in Israel, will meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today and visit Gaza. And families of the prisoners of war say that make sure a deal is signed. This morning, also, Moroccan Air Force planes landed in Israel carrying 180 tons of humanitarian aid for Gaza. Okay. What is Steve Witkoff doing? Why is he there? And is he there one step before we enter a ceasefire similar to what happened in January? There's a likelihood that that would happen. Why? Because now there are talks that the United States and Israel are agreeing that we are not going to go into any more partial deals inside of the Gaza Strip. We're not going to go and have one phase or two phase or three phase. Israel, US now aligning comprehensive Gaza plan, no more partial deals. Of course, as usual, the devil lies in the details. This is where the problems lie, and both the Israelis and the Americans, the administrations, have always practiced deception. They speak with forked tongues, and they constantly have treacherous ways in relation to the ceasefire. But we've been going on for 2 years now. Israel will have elections most likely early next year. Netanyahu has a window to have a ceasefire now without too many problems. And also, the pressure is mounting on Israel because of the global rage against them. So there's a real prospect here of something happening, but nothing tangible is happening so far in relation to the people of Gaza. And also, we can't conclude anything unless there are direct outright confirmations. What is the view of the Palestinian resistance on this, and are they looking to get an all-out deal? Well, the Palestinian resistance offered a deal immediately after. Well, they offered a deal way before the 7th of October, but Israel didn't want a deal. They just wanted to maintain the state of war and arrogance, which led to Al-Aqsa flood. Then after that campaign started, they offered Israel to release all of the prisoners of war and have a settlement if Israel releases Palestinian prisoners of war and hostages, the real ones. Israel did not agree, and they decided to go on this whole campaign in Gaza thinking that they can reach their objectives fairly quickly, only for them to realize now, almost 2 years in, that it's impossible. The Palestinians are telling them now, we're not going to talk to you so long as there's starvation. Firstly, we were very close to reach a deal. You unilaterally withdrew and started to cause problems. Now we will not be, we want a deal and we're willing to go back to the negotiating table. And we have proven that we are flexible and serious, but we're not going to go back to the negotiating table with the starvation campaign happening in Gaza. Feed everyone, provide relief, then we talk. That is still the same position of the Palestinian resistance from several days. You lift the siege, allow our people to eat, give them what they need, then maybe we can talk about ending the war completely. But there's also something very important. There was a conference led by France and Saudi Arabia talking about a two-state solution in the United States. And more Western countries are now saying we're going to recognize a Palestinian state in September. Some of them, like Britain, are using this as leverage. Their recognition of a Palestinian state is conditional. So from Keir Starmer's perspective, if Israel does breach a ceasefire, he wouldn't necessarily recognize a Palestinian state. But the message is, we're trying to apply diplomatic pressure, regardless of what you think about that diplomatic pressure, how sincere or full of integrity it is. If there is anything as such in relation to all of these countries. And the Palestinian resistance, as a matter of fact, multiple Palestinian resistance factions, not just one or two of them, they made a statement as a response to this two-state conference that's happening now, with more countries talking about recognizing a Palestinian state. And in the statement, the Palestinian resistance faction said that we support, in other words, we support anything that diplomatically pushes our cause to better places, things that are positive for the Palestinian people, and a solution that will give us a sovereign country with Jerusalem as its capital. Notice the terminology is important, not East Jerusalem or part of the Jerusalem as its capital. But they also said one very important thing, and in defiance of all of the nonsensical and abhorrent talk about disarming the Palestinian resistance, or like the talk of Macron that any Palestinian state needs to be a disarmed state. They said the following: the resistance will not stop until the Israeli occupation ends. This conference that's happening carried important implications related to the Palestinian people's right to establish their independent, fully sovereign state, but that the resistance will not cease until the end of the Israeli occupation. Now, we're noticing a terminology from the Palestinian resistance here of, by the way, total liberation. So even if there is a temporary solution, we are going to continue, according to the Palestinian resistance. They also added, "We salute the legendary steadfastness of our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, who are patiently and steadfastly facing one of the most horrific wars known to modern times, the war of genocide and systematic starvation waged relentlessly by the Zionist occupation. The great steadfastness in the face of the machine of killing and destruction constitutes the fundamental pillar that has thwarted the goals of the aggression and consolidated our people's right to life and resistance. The Palestinian situation is an internal affair for our people in the homeland and abroad. On this basis, we call for the implementation of previous national agreements signed in Cairo, Algiers, Moscow, and Beijing, all of which emphasize the need to recognize the Palestinian House of Work, including reforming the PLO, along with holding presidential, legislative, and national council elections at home and abroad based on national and democratic foundations and without any preconditions." Clear statement coming from the Palestinian resistance, with the biggest movements included, like Hamas and the PIJ, but also the PFLP and other major resistance organizations in Palestine, saying that, cool, you want to accept a Palestinian state, fine, amazing, but our resistance isn't going to stop up until we liberate our land. And from their perspective, the fact on the ground is Palestine is Palestine, it's historical Palestine, not this part nor that part. Now, this is a very strong message from the Palestinian resistance. If you want to support the Palestinian cause, great, but our campaign will continue so long as the historical rights of the Palestinian people are not met and occupation still exists. This is showing us that we're not talking about something that is going to de-escalate with any sort of deal that's going to happen here and there. The ceasefire in Gaza, if it happens, it's going to be exactly what it is, a ceasefire. Many countries are trying to make it out as a big solution. You know, they're talking about a two-state solution. However, we're talking about something temporary here because in the long run, it's untenable. Israel made itself untenable. Israel proved to the whole world that it's a pariah state that has no right to exist. It is an entity of supremacy and terror that conducts a genocide and a campaign of starvation in broad daylight. And from the Palestinian resistance, as we saw clearly from that message, they will not be stopping up until full liberation and up until all of the Palestinian rights get back to all of their people. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, I hope I added some beneficial information for you. In the meantime, stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.